The ways in which the opponent intervenes in a field of human consciousness are two: attack and concealment. The attack is the active phase of the opponent. It is the time at which it triggers our inner demons, keeping us in chains. This is the phase it uses to energetically support itself, to feed, according to the Toltec tradition. The main weapon, the most obvious and probably the only one it owns, having proven effectiveness, is the use of the disempowering spiral, led up to the point where we generate a large amount of emotional energy of attachment to the thought image triggered. An emotional energy about an almost uncontrollable need, an addiction, in fact. You just need to take a quick look around to realize that virtually every human being surrounding you is handled through one or more emotional addictions, which they cannot and fail to do without. A manipulation which always originates in and is grown by the same strategy, the disempowering spiral. However, look at yourself. Maybe the look will be less rapid than what is necessary to find the speck in your fellow human being, but you may still find something that simulates an emotional addiction. Concealment is the passive phase of the opponent, in which it momentarily moves back and uses the advantage unconsciously acquired on us to keep us in a low energy state and out of balance, so as not being able to cope a later attack with energy and consciousness. How does it succeed in all this? Through overfeeding the surface mind with a useless tangle of thoughts that will produce low energy emotions and moods, such as anger, jealousy, envy, resentment, concern, and similar, all shades to the same emotion. Fear, which is ultimately the opponent's fear of being discovered. Thoughts that are facing automatically, changeable, erratic, contradictory, which trap us in a very simple way. They think themselves with the I pronoun. I think. I feel. To me, what it did is bad. Did you see what she did to me? Etc., etc. But who is this I? How many I are in your head? Is it possible that this I wants one thing and 5 minutes later wants another, sometimes very against the first one? It is not possible answering these questions without consciousness. But given that trying to answer to these questions, or just watching the ballet of the surface mind out of control, means starting to cut supplies to the opponent, the surface mind is overfed with chatter, music and noise to prevent the unfolding of consciousness.
A lot of
the end, what happens in our lives, leaving the opponent continuing in its work of suggestion and control of the field of human consciousness. We won't follow our inspirations, that is, what makes us really feeling happy to exist. Because the higher consciousness world's inspirations produce positive emotions, thus high energy emotions, which to the opponent are totally indigestible. We will oppose resistance to changes and will not accept those that cannot be avoided, because for the opponent, every change is a risk of being discovered. The opponent will create enough thoughts of resistance that will generate emotions of resistance, so, as well as doing everything possible to prevent the serene acceptance of change, we will support the opponent with low energy emotions created by the futile resistance to what cannot be avoided. We will stand against something or someone outside ourselves and will fight it as the cause of our misery and our sickness, because we will attribute the responsibility of low energy emotions living within us to external events or other people. But a simple and aware gaze is enough to realize that everything existing in our life was created and is being maintained only by us, and we are the only and sole responsible for that. We will become anxious and worried about losing what we have, and we will be more likely acting to defend rather than share. But whose anxiety and this concern of losing something is this? It is only the opponent's. As human beings, magical and wonderful as we are, all of us, we have nothing to lose, and we do not depend on anything, because we are everything. But it takes consciousness to find this out. A consciousness that the opponent cannot, nor should, allow the expansion of, for various reasons, perhaps even greater than itself. A consciousness that the opponent knows it cannot hold, because the consciousness growing process is unstoppable and never-ending once awakened. We won't have equilibrium in the care of ourselves, but will remain emotionally attached to habits and situations that stop us instead of freeing us. Ramta, whichever this being will be, identifies with rightness these emotional attachments. Attachments to people, places, things, times, and events. Every emotional attachment to one of these spheres creates habits, and habits are actions that control a human being, not the contrary. We will live in our mind and its illusory creations rather than the reality of what happens in the present moment. Where is the totality of ourselves now? In in the vast majority of cases, it's in the assumptions and presuppositions of the surface mind, even while we are acting. Thus, in one of the opponent's induced overfeeding aspects of surface mind. We will externally project our assumptions about reality when they are nothing more than thoughts generated by the opponent, and to them we will follow in the actions as if they were true. Isn't it like that in our life? Isn't it true that instead of asking directly, with humility, integrity and listening, instead of observing quietly, silently, in awareness and acceptance, we ask ourselves questions, we give ourselves answers, and then we believe that these answers are the reality? How many things have we destroyed in our life this way, then realizing it was all only in our surface mind? How many things have we destroyed in our lives, believing a mind manipulated by the opponent? We will separate more and more from other human beings and from life in its totality, for fear of suffering, to lose what we have, to not be able to defend ourselves from assaults by others. So we will create, or will become part, or we will end up in groups of us against them, built primarily for defense something unreal from something else equally unreal on the other side, something that death will sweep away as leaves on trees in autumn. There is no us against them. Aren't them perhaps human beings caught in the same illusion, manifested in another form? And if so, what is the difference between us and them? This is what the opponent is creating in our lives if we give it leave to do so. Does it sound familiar? How much are we immersed in these things? How much are people around us immersed in these things? At the end, what the opponent is creating in our lives, if we give it leave to do so, can be summed up in one single word: suffer.